Hello there, friends and sane persons. My name is Kyle. It's Wednesday, and it's time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. If it's your first time, or even if it's not, Wednesday Whimsy is a short show I do every Wednesday, and we talk about a game, a board game, a game-related topic, sometimes a top 10, whatever I happen to be in the mood for that week. So if you notice, the last couple of weeks we were upstairs because of the flood in my basement, but the basement has been repaired thanks to a very hardworking construction crew. So I've kind of moved back down. I think I have a little bit better internet connection down here anyway. So we're going to do it from here for now. We'll see where we go in the future. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What we're doing today is we're going to talk about a game that came out fairly recently. And it's a game that I've actually been really enjoying. I guess I'm kind of spoiling part of the review here, but the game is called The Guild of Merchant Explorers, which is a terrible name for a game because it tells you absolutely nothing about the game other than that there's a Guild of Merchant Explorers. The title being what it is, let that be. Let's talk a little bit more about what the game is. So the game is basically a board game non-writing version of a roll and write game. So what I mean is in this game, you're going to be flipping a card up and then doing what the card says, making some sort of mark on your board with various pieces. And then you're going to be trying to accomplish certain goals and getting points in a variety of ways, depending on the map that you're choosing to play on. That's really, what it is. At the end of 4 rounds, between the rounds, the board is largely going to reset. So you're trying to kind of make checkpoints, as it were, of progress throughout the game so that when the game does reset, you are in a better place, a better position so that you can go farther and try and achieve your goals. That's kind of it. I mean, there's not a whole lot of theme here. I guess there's some queen probably who has sent you out to explore. And that that is what it is. But that's kind of how the game works. So, what the game is. Let's talk about briefly how the game works. So, what you're going to have in the game, and I'm going to show you some of the components, and then we'll go over to the website to see if we can see them a little bit better. You've got this board here, right? And this board has a variety of regions. And each round, you're going to be flipping over a card, and the card is going to tell you what kind of placement you're going to do. So, for example, this card says you're going to place on any 2 hexes. They just have to be next to each other. Or you might have this one that says place on any 2 grassland spaces. That's an interesting zoom. And so, you're going to look at this board here, and you'll see, okay, well, I have grassland right here, and you always have to place next to something that you have. So you're going to use these little markers to go out and you're always next to this capital city, so you can put this out here. And if you cover one of these coin spots, you're going to get a coin, and the coins are really the score in the game. There are also these towers in the corner, and when you get to them, you get to use these cute little wooden towers. And you're going to place them on there, and you'll score bonus points based upon what number of tower it was for you, your first, second, third, or fourth. If ever you completely fill in an area of one color, for example, if you had tokens on all of those, you're immediately going to build what's called a village, which means you replace one of your cubes with one of these little house things. And at the end of the round, as I mentioned, the board is going to clear off, but these things remain. So by placing these out there, it's kind of like an outpost for you so that you can start farther away and get to farther and farther places on the board. Showing the board itself is a little difficult maybe to see and talk about just because I have to do it backwards. So let's take a look at the internet. We've got here a better picture of it. Let me see if I can zoom in. There we go. So this is a different map than the one I showed you. But here, if for example, I were to draw that 2 grassland spot, well, I could put 1 right here because that's next to something I have, or 1 right here because it's next to the capital city. Doesn't matter. They don't have to be next to each other unless the card says so. Eventually, you're going to get these circular areas here. You see like that. If you get that, if you put a cube on those and it's connected to another one, like for example, if you had some cubes that went from here down to here, you'll get the points. You're just going to multiply this number by this number. That would be, in this case, 2 times 2 is 4. And you'll then cover one up, kind of marking it as used so you can never use it again, which is, I think it's called building a trading post. The game has some weird terms of its own, which we'll talk to when we get into some of the positives and negatives about the game. But anyway, as the game goes on, you'll see these little chits here. Those are treasures. Once you get a treasure, you cover it up so you can't get it again. But pretty much at the end of the round, everything that's your color, except these little village pieces, is going to go off the board, and you're going to start again. Now, let's talk about another couple of things about the game. Oh, hello. That's very zoomed in. Let's see if I can zoom out a little bit. So the cards come in, there's 5 basic cards, which you can see here, and then 4 special cards. And in round 1, arrow 1, excuse me, you're going to use this number 1 card. And as soon as it comes up for the first time, you're going to draw 2 special cards from this special card deck. And everyone is going to have their own set of special cards. You're going to choose one to keep and one to throw away. And then in the future, whenever that number 1 comes up, you're going to activate the card that you have chosen that corresponds to it. And these cards are always amazing. They're various, much more powerful special abilities than you have on the basic cards. It might be place 4 tokens anywhere you like. It might be place 1 token and then 1 other token in each of the spaces around it. I mean, there's a variety of different ones that come, and it's really not possible to discuss what they all are. But as the game goes on, you're going to get 1 the first time the 1 comes up. You'll get another special card when the 2 comes up, another special card when the 3 comes up, which is, of course, in the 3rd round. And then the final one, in the final round, you're going to get to reuse one of the other 3. So you'll get to use it twice that round. Anyway, you play those 4 rounds, and whoever has the most points, which are these coins, is the winner. Now, you also see here there are special goals, and I can show you some here. Let me just pause this. There we go. So each map, there are 4 basic maps in the game, and each one has a set of special goals that's attached to it. And the first person to achieve it gets the 10 points, and then everybody thereafter can get 5 points for achieving it. And for example, this one is to discover 2 villages on mountain spaces. So you do that. You're the first person there, you get 10 bonus points. You also get points when you establish villages. You get points for covering up different spots, and then those treasure cards will often give you points as well. And by building those towers, you get a ton of bonus points as well. So at the end of the game, you're going to see who has the most points. And, well, as usual, that person is going to win. So that's kind of how the game works. It's not very complicated in terms of rules. It's flip a card, everyone resolves it, and then you flip another card and everyone resolves that. And for the most part, everyone's going to be doing the same thing, but occasionally these special cards are going to come up, which you get to do something that only you can do. And at the same time, someone else is doing something that only they can do. And that's how the game works. So let's talk briefly about what makes the game special. The first thing I would say is that the rules are incredibly simple for the most part. We're going to talk about one in a moment. But for the most part, the rules are very easy to explain. In fact, I've kind of gone over all of them. The rule book itself is just a couple of pages, and a lot of it is examples and a couple of clarifications of some of the cards. But it's just that easy to learn. It's a great game for new players to get into because, again, it's things that feel natural, and there's not a whole lot of weirdness in the rules, not a whole lot of special exceptions, not a whole lot of surprises in the game other than the pleasant surprise of your special card. It's very straightforward, very easy to get into, and yet it's also enjoyable enough that I've played it now several times, and I still really enjoy it, even though I'm not a beginner at it. I think it works really well for people of kind of any skill level or familiarity. Very good game to play with families, one I would definitely recommend. If you have, I guess not young children, but older children, I think they would take really nicely to it as well. Another thing that I like about it is that it's really fast. The deck of cards is going to be 6 cards, then 7, then 8, and then 9. And so you're going to have, well, you could probably do that math. Never do math in front of viewers, but you're going to have that many turns. It's not that many. It's a very short game. And on your turn, for the most part, you're usually placing 1 or 2 tokens. It takes a little longer when your special stuff comes up, but not that much. And so it's a very quick game to play. You can certainly play it multiple times in an evening. Also, kind of another special thing, I mentioned the game comes with different maps. You have this one, and then on the other side, there's a completely different map with some slightly different rules and different goals that you're going to be going for, a different kind of layout. So it's going to be a game that you can kind of play again and again and have it feel a little bit different. There are, as I mentioned, 4 maps in the base game, and the company immediately released a small expansion, which is actually pretty big. But it's 2 additional maps and some special tokens that kind of go along with them. But that just sort of increases the variety that you can find in the game. Another special thing that I really like about this game is that it's always your turn. You're always active. There's very little downtime. I mean, obviously, if someone has trouble making decisions, that could drag the game down. But because you're not playing, everyone's always playing. We flip a card, everyone does something, just like a roll and write game in many cases. You're really going to feel like you're always doing something. You just kind of flip a card, do what it says, flip another one. It's really, you're always very engaged, and I really enjoy that. There's not a whole lot of player interaction, I will say. You're kind of pretty much playing a solitaire game with your friends, but it's a very interesting one, and because everyone's special abilities are a little different, it's kind of fun to see how your map develops vastly different from anybody else's map. Another thing that I really like about the game is these little special power cards. I've mentioned them already, but there's a deck of, I don't know, 20 of them, 30, somewhere between 20 and 30 of these individual special power cards. And okay, a lot of them are variations on a theme, but you see it's a pretty good sized deck here. But it's really satisfying to get a special ability and think, this is crazy overpowered. Look at all the amazing things I can do on my turn. But everyone else is thinking the same thing about their special ability. There's not a dud in the deck. And every time one comes up, you're really excited for it just because you're thinking, okay, if you're kind of planning, right? Because there aren't that many cards. And then as I showed before, there's this little board here that shows you what cards have come up. So it's very easy to keep track of what's left, what's coming next, and try and figure things out. And that allows you to make a lot of good plans. But these special abilities, sometimes special abilities are duds, but here they really aren't. Here they're really interesting, and they kind of make the game. In fact, the game wouldn't be that interesting without them. I think that's really the backbone, is that each person gets their own special ability that feels different, feels powerful, and lets you have really good turns and feel like you're really making some progress on your board. So, and then I kind of already mentioned the variety of the game. There's enough in there that it's going to allow you to play the game several times before you ever start feeling bored of it. And also the speed of the game really helps with that too. If it's going to be a short game, you want to be able to play a couple of times in a row and have it feel a little bit different. So those are a lot of things that make the game special. But now, as always, we're going to go and talk about the but, right? The things that might be not as good about the game, or might be areas where improvement could occur. Now, I really have only 3 of them about this game. It's a pretty good game overall, but and one of them is kind of nitpicky, and then the other 2, I think, are fairly serious issues. Or, well, not fairly serious, but more significant, let's say it like that. The first one is the nitpicky one, and that is that the game has a lot of jargon in it. It uses terms like village and city and outpost and kind of very similar terms to mean very different things. It's called exploring, not placing a cube. It's called a village when it's this thing, but then those little circular discs, those are cities, the circular spots, and then the disc you place is a trading post. And those terms don't naturally first of all, they kind of feel like they're almost the same thing, and then it's not really natural to remember them. And because all of these goal cards are going to reference those terms, you really do have to make sure you understand what they are. Or if you're the person teaching, people are going to be asking about them all the time. Now, I'm not saying that there's a lot of heavy terminology in the game. There aren't lots of keywords or anything like that. But the jargon in it is a little bit much for your very first time. I've found that people kind of struggle with that. But it's not enough to bring the game down. It's just kind of something to be aware of. What is a little bit bigger problem is someday I'm going to do my list of the top 10 rules I hate teaching. And this game has one of those, and that is that city rule. Remember, I mentioned when you connect two spaces, two of those circular spaces, you multiply them, and then you cover one of them up. That rule makes no sense to people. I have had to, in the middle of a game, explain that rule 4 or 5 times because people just can't remember it. I don't know why. It's not conceptually very hard, but a lot of people have a really hard time internalizing that rule. And it becomes to the point where I'm like, oh, great, I got to teach this one. And I haven't figured out a great way to do it yet, even, unfortunately. So I do wish that rule were somewhere a little bit clearer. Maybe a player aid might have helped, like that shows the circles and kind of gives the formula of when you do this and this, you multiply these and then you cover up whichever one you want. That might have helped things out a little bit. But on the whole, that can get in the way. And especially on a first or second game, it can drag the game down just a bit. So be aware of that. And then the final rule, the final but, and this is a big but, a great big one. And that is the components of the game are fine, but the way that you manipulate them sometimes is not. Let me give an example here. We'll go back to the board. If I can, yeah, there we go. So here we have the board again, and you'll see on this all these yellow pieces. So at the end of the round, all the yellow cubes come up, all of the yellow houses stay down, all of the cardboard tokens stay down. And this board is not big. I kind of showed it here. I mean, just sort of for scale, you can see the size of these, I guess, next to my finger. I mean, these are small spaces. And if you're picking up all those things, it's really important that you pick up only the right things and you leave those little houses, the villages, out there, because otherwise you'll hurt your position. But if you bump them or move them at all, it can be it can be problematic to try and remember where they were sometimes, and it could improve or hurt your position based upon how you move them. So the whole concept of picking things up at the end of the round, while interesting in terms of gameplay, is actually kind of clunky to manipulate. And I find I have to be very careful at picking things up, not to move stuff around, not to brush stuff, not to knock things over. Also, if you drop something on the board, I don't know, you casually drop a card or you drop your phone or a pen or whatever you happen to have in your hands while you're playing, it will scatter these pieces, and your game is pretty much ruined at that point. So you've got to be very careful with what you're doing around the table when this game is being played, because it is so sensitive to making sure that no one bumps this. Now, the only way I could think to improve that would be if this were like a dry erase board and you put a dot in a spot instead of the cube. And then when you got a city or one of these villages, it was a magnetic piece that clipped on so that you couldn't knock it away, because that would solve the problem of bumping the table or bumping the board, and then you could just erase the dots at the end of the round. I think that might be a solution, but it's the only one I can think of. And of course, that would probably increase the cost significantly and would be a fundamental component change. So I think, I don't know. I think it is as good as it can be right now without significantly increasing the price and changing the development process. But I will say that is a pretty big but here, just because if you're not careful, you can have a terrible game experience due to just some clumsiness, some manual dexterity issues, or because you picked up the wrong piece, or because they were all tightly clustered together, you happen to bump the wrong one. It's just very sensitive, and you have to pay attention to that. So, but those are really my only 3 negatives about the game. Let's go on now and talk very quickly about the final rating. So, my final rating for this game, this was a hard one. I mean, the first time I played it, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then as I played it before, I got less, this is amazing, and more, this is pretty good. So I've cooled on it just a bit. I think initially I would have given it a 9, and now I'm probably down to an 8 out of 10. But that's still pretty good. This is a fantastic game. It's a lot of fun. The game is for 1 to 4 players. I will say that the solo version is very underwhelming. You just basically play against yourself, and there's a mechanism that's going to kind of cancel those goals as the game goes by, so you've got to make sure you complete them in time. But on the whole, I have never found it had any trouble. And then there's like a threshold, right? There's an easy, a medium, and a hard level difficulty. Those are the number of points you're trying to get, and then you also have to achieve all 3 goals in order to win. But I've never had problems doing it. I mean, you just kind of say, I'm going to do these things, and then you do them. And I have always scored more than the high level of difficulty. So I found the solo to be a little bit too easy, but a great way to learn the game, especially because you get kind of right in there and can play it through. And it's nice to have it as an option, but I just don't know that it's a very satisfying solo experience. But as a 2-player game, it's amazing. And because it's real time, or not real time, but because it's always your turn and there's no downtime in the game, 3 and 4 players don't add really substantially any more time to the game. And so it's a great one to play with other people if you happen to have a group of 3 or 4. I think this game on the whole is really an enjoyable one. It may not look like much. I mean, the board looks kind of bland, and the box is kind of beige, and the name is kind of boring. But the game itself overcomes those challenges, and I find it to be a really enjoyable one that I think is definitely worth just about everybody trying, and I think a lot of you are really going to like it. So there we go. My final rating is currently an 8 out of 10. And with that, we're done. We've got that's another Wednesday Whimsy in the bag. And so we are going to end it here, but I will see you all hopefully next time. And I don't know what I'm doing next time yet, but I rarely do until I decide. But hopefully it'll be something fun. Go out there and try some great games and have a great time playing them. Bye-bye.